Patricia, can you hear me? Patricia, are you there? Well, it seems like there's a slight delay, and we're going to wait and see if she can hear me. All right, now, Patricia, the defense in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial has closed its case in the North Gauteng High Court in Pretoria. Now, to you, what were the most notable things that you observed since you started reporting on this case and covering this case?
Well, there has been, a whole lot of activity, interesting activity throughout this trial. And, as I have already said, it has been 39 days of a marathon trial. And we really saw a fierce battle between the Oscar Pistorius defense team and the prosecution, who has brought the charges against him for shooting and killing his model girlfriend, Roux Steenkamp. Now, of course, today, both the defense and the state have rested their cases. The defense closing their case after having called 16 witnesses, their last witness being the sports doctor, Professor Wayne Derman, who closed his testimony yesterday. And of course, we will be returning on the 7th of August for the closing arguments, and that will be on the 7th and the 8th. But before that, the state will be submitting their heads of arguments on the 30th of July, and followed by the defense on the 4th of August, just before they come back for the closing arguments on the 7th of August and on the 8th of August. But let's talk more about the interesting aspects of this marathon trial. And right now I am joined by my colleague, Griselda Lewis, who will help me to unpack some of those interesting facts. Griselda, it certainly has been a fierce legal battle. Take us through some of the interesting aspects that we have observed throughout this trial.
Well, Patricia, certainly from the very beginning, the police and their capabilities, how they handle crime scene evidence is certainly something that came to the spotlight. That South Africa, not just South Africa, but South Africa's judicial system was also very much under the spotlight about how South Africa would be able to handle such a huge case. And in the beginning, we saw, alleged police bungling relating to the scene at Oscar Pistorius' home, the storage of crucial crime scene evidence coming under the spotlight. And certainly as the trial went on, what we saw was the emotions really starting to come out inside court when we saw Oscar Pistorius breaking down. The Oscar Pistorius that we've known for so many years was someone who went on to put South Africa on the map. Well, he stood very tall on his prosthetics, but then he was a broken man inside court when he took the stand to give testimony about what he says was all a mistake on the morning that he shot and killed Roux Steenkamp. And certainly, with all the graphic images that came outside from inside court, really chilling moments where we started to see, emotions from Roux Steenkamp's mother. Certainly both families might be going through a difficult time, but Roux Steenkamp's mother, certainly, she remained stony-faced throughout this trial, not showing any emotions, but we did see her react, very slightly when we saw those images coming from inside court. And, one of the interesting aspects also was relating to the about turn in the Oscar Pistorius murder trial, where we saw Oscar Pistorius being sent for a psychiatric evaluation. Oscar Pistorius' state of mind was put under the spotlight. And, another Oscar Pistorius that came to light was someone who had a love for guns. An Oscar Pistorius who we all certainly didn't know, a love for guns that exceeded so many that there were questions about whether Oscar Pistorius was fit to even carry a firearm. And, Oscar Pistorius, the two faces of this Oscar Pistorius who we didn't know. One who stood very tall on his prosthetics, somebody who went on to represent South Africa well. And then there's another man who was broken, who was shattered, who we heard testimony of someone having violent outbursts, and someone who really didn't take into account anybody else in his life. But certainly his relationship with Roux Steenkamp was what took center stage here. Did Oscar Pistorius love Roux Steenkamp? Did he intend to shoot and kill her on that day? So certainly we've seen the state throughout these 38 days, because the 39th certainly was a very short day. Through these 38 days, the state maintaining that Oscar Pistorius shot and killed Roux Steenkamp in a fit of rage, while the defense says no, they have it absolutely wrong, it was all a mistake. So when we go to those heads of arguments, it will be the last chance for both the state and the defense to convince Judge Thokozile Masipa of their cases. And certainly with the two very strong legal eagles that we've seen here, that will be the last chance to convince this court of their case. So certainly the heads of arguments is what we're looking forward to next.
And of course, credibility being a huge issue that seemed to have played right in the hand of the state, especially with the 16 witnesses of the defense. Time and time again, their credibility came under immense scrutiny.
If we could take, for example, the credibility, for example, of Oscar Pistorius as a manager who took the stand, questions raised about his relationship with Oscar Pistorius, whether he would be able to give objective testimony in that he had such a close relationship with Oscar Pistorius. The very same until the last witness, Professor Wayne Derman, as you rightly point out, Patricia, his credibility also put under the spotlight because of the relationship that he has with Oscar Pistorius. We know that, he's been a treating physician for Oscar Pistorius. He's travelled with him quite extensively. So whether Professor Derman was biased or not really remains to be seen how the court will treat this, because there's also the video which never took a centre stage inside the North Gauteng High Court, the leaked video which I speak of, where Professor Derman had constantly been testifying about Oscar Pistorius and his difficulty on his stumps, his mobility, but then again the video painting a totally different picture. So credibility is one of the major aspects that took centre stage. And at the end of the day, it's all up to Judge Thokozile Masipa to decide the fate of Oscar Pistorius. Once those heads of arguments are done, we understand there'll be another postponement, and then Judge Thokozile Masipa will have that time to decide on Oscar Pistorius' fate, and then certainly we'll have an indication, maybe towards the end of September, as to whether Oscar Pistorius, to what extent he will be held responsible for shooting and killing Grievous Steenkamp.
And of course, that being my colleague Criselda Lewis. But as you have heard, although both the state and the defense have rest their cases, it is not the end. They still have a mammoth task ahead of them, compiling their heads of arguments and coming back for the closing arguments to really convince the judge and approve their cases respectively. We will be back on the 7th of August.